Hello, and welcome to a demonstration of MAPCITE's Location Intelligence Toolkit. Today we'll be taking an in-depth look through the functionality available within MAPCITE, but if you wish to skip to certain sections, please use the index here. We'll start the demonstration with the everyday functionality of visualizing and extracting data that most users will utilize. Here we can see that a heat map visualization of a large data set representing house sales in England and Wales in 2013. We can view this as a heat map where the hotspots show the highest value of the house sales. Alternatively, heat maps can also be generated on the proximity of points to one another. It is also possible to combine the heat map with a choropleth or patchwork quilt layer, and clicking on an individual district in that area can give us a summary of the data that falls within that area. The summary with the choropleth indicates the darker the area, the higher the value, and correspondingly, the lighter it is, the lower the value. Both the choropleth and the heat maps in MAPCITE are dynamically created, reflecting the value of the data shown in the area of the map. As we can see here, as we pan and zoom, the heat map changes and we need to change the intensity accordingly to make it clearer to view. In addition to showing as a heat map and choropleth, we can also put pin data onto the map. In this instance, it's the location of branches, and clicking on the individual pin gives us the view of the data, a summary of where it is, and then moving into MAPCITE's Location Analytics tool, the user is able to define a radius around that point and get a summary of the data that falls into that area. Here we can see the number of house sales and the distance from that branch that have happened in the period. In addition to visualizing the data within the Location Analytics, we can also export that data into an Excel spreadsheet for further analysis or for sharing. Simply clicking on the Export All button will take the entire contents of that radius circle and put it into an Excel spreadsheet for us. MAPCITE, therefore, is not just a visualization tool, it's a tool to extract data from the map. MAPCITE's range of extraction tools mean that true geographical filtering of data is now possible using the canvas of the map. In this example, we are now drawing a freehand shape around an area on the map to extract again the data that specifically falls within a user-defined area. Simply drawing a freehand shape on the map, completing that, adjusting it where required to ensure precise accuracy of the data to be extracted, choosing the data set that we wish to extract again into Excel. MAPCITE's easy-to-use functionality brings complex data visualization and extraction into the hands of the everyday user. Now we move on to explore MAPCITE's timelining functionality, which enables users to bring to life data that has a temporal element. Simply selecting the date range that you wish to view on the timeline at the bottom of the screen. In this instance, we've chosen to visualize the heat map for the first quarter of 2013. We will see how the date range showing at the bottom of the screen is what's reflected in our heat map, which again we can scale down to make it easier to view. Now, simply moving the timeline across the screen will change the heat map to show, again, reflecting the data that falls within the date range on our timeline. It's also possible for the user to change the range simply by zooming in on the timeline controls at the bottom to give a maybe month by month, week by week, day by day range view of the data. As we can see, each time that the user moves and changes and interacts with the timeline, the heat map will dynamically recalibrate. We'll now explore MAPCITE's animation feature, which takes the visualizing of temporal data further than the timeline. Again, selecting the date range that we wish to create the animated heat map from, we pick that from the date picker and have a choice of either creating that animation as a cumulative view or as a day by day, month by month or week by week rolling view. The user selects the number of frames they want the video to run to, and MAPCITE then builds that animation for you. When the building process is complete, the user simply presses play and the MAPCITE tool automatically plays back the animation of the heat map of the date range that the user selected. Here we can see how on a week by week basis where the properties were being sold in the region of the map we are looking at. The animation feature is another example of how MAPCITE's suite of easy-to-use tools brings sophistication from simplification, enabling all users to harness the power of location intelligence. This section will explore how users can now, with MAPCITE technology, create and save new boundary shapes to provide summary areas for their data. We saw earlier how MAPCITE enables users to create the choropleth or patchwork quilt map from a preloaded set of boundary areas. Now we have the functionality to enable those users to create new shapes, which for example could be a boundary around one of their sales offices, drawing on the map to create the shape, giving it a name, and then saving it will enable that box to now be used in the future to provide the summary at a very local level. As we can see, with the shape having been created and then saved, it will now appear in our, once we have re-indexed the data, in our list that we can select from. Here it is at the bottom, and checking on the box, clicking in the area, shows us the name of the area that we created and the summary of the data that falls within that shape. Having then created that area, we may wish to create additional ones to fall into that subset. Putting our markers on the map will help us to create those shapes, and let's create another one which adjoins that patch. So again, simply drawing by clicking on the map the area that we wish to include, completing the shape when we're ready, and then saving that with a new name against the same data set will enable us to have two sales areas to view summary of our data. As we can see, having then re-indexed the data and then reapplying the choropleth layer, we now have the two shapes adjoining one another for which we can use. In this section, we'll explore further some of the additional functionality that gives the real power of location intelligence to all users. Within MAPCITE, there are a number of search functions available, from a simple address or town or postcode or zip code search, through advanced search features which may include additional location points. There are also a number of options that we can do with the display of the pins and what we display within the marker sets as well. For example, it could be useful for us to put a radius and fix that radius around some of our points on the map. In this instance, we'll go for a 2-mile radius around each of our branches, therefore seeing quickly and easily the data that falls within it. And again, we can apply multiple different colours to that to make it easy to visualise. The MAPCITE user interface also makes it really easy for us to change the pin icon that we use from a pre-selected list or from individual ones that we upload. We can also display labels against those pins with simple checkbox controls to turn them on and off again. For larger data sets, there's too many pins to show on the map all in one go, so MAPCITE will automatically cluster those pin areas, and then clicking on the cluster groups will break it down into more manageable views where we will click on individual pins. The data within that pin can also be edited from within this modal box. There's also functionality within that box to get directions to that pin from any other point. Coming back to the clustering, we may choose not to show those as standard cluster points but as a blob layer, which is a varying size cluster dependent upon the amount of data that falls within it. As we can see here, this now replaces the standard clustering points with circles of varying sizes. The larger the circle, the more the data points that fall in the general area. It's also possible to apply filters to the data, both through the markers and the heat map and the choropleth. Whilst we're in the markers, for each individual attribute within the data, it is possible to select a different pin icon for that section of the data, enabling us to have multiple different pin icons for each subset of the data. As we could see here, applying those filters changes the view of the data on the map. Within MAPCITE, it is also possible to create a read-only interactive version of the map for us to share with colleagues. Simply clicking on the Share Data tab will create a brand new and unique URL The only data having been shared is that you have selected, with any filters already applied. That new URL could be shared with colleagues via Twitter or email, for example, and as we can see here as we've zoomed out, the data that's been shared has only been that I saw on my screen. Any data outside of that area excluded from the shared map. Returning to our original map, it is easy to see how it is possible to manage and control shared maps that you have created with colleagues. At the bottom of the administration panel, you can see here a list of those that we have created and a simple control for deleting the URL. Once that shared map is deleted, that link will no longer work. Whilst on this page, we can simply see the easy to use controls for deleting datasets that are loaded, uploading and removing pin icons from a simple browse for new file. The same can be done with simple KML line boundary files. And here, the ability for users to upload their own predefined shapefiles for choropleth purposes. And we can see in our list here those that we already have, including the ones we created by drawing on the map. This control panel ensures it remains easy for our users to control the data on their map. Returning to the map, we can see how those simple boundary lines, KML files, can be uploaded to show us an outline of an area without doing any summary of the data within it. These KMLs may also be lines to simplify, for example, pipelines or routes. Within the Tools section of the menu, it is easy to see how we can apply some checkboxes to display information when we hover over pins. It is also possible to check the box to enable us to move pins to give us greater accuracy over the placing of individual marker pins. Simply moving the pin around the map and clicking OK will save the location for future use. The Save View button enables us also to select a home or default view for the map. We have the functionality available to us to annotate the map by dropping some preset symbols of varying sizes and shapes onto the map, moving those around to get them into the right position, to highlight something that we may want to draw attention to, and potentially rotating that arrow to put it in precisely the correct position. Additionally, we can write some text to place next to that arrow to give it some further relevance and annotating the map further. Again, selecting the text, the size, and even the colour that we wish to use. And as with the arrow, when we've added that to the map, we can move that to precisely the right location. We've aimed to give you today an overview of the range of MAPCITE functionality and tools available. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you'd like any further information. Many thanks.